you need to have that strong foundation in order to be able to do your best. If you don't know how something works or how something operates, how are you going to be able to jump in and actually be able to contribute in a way that's meaningful?
I'm here right now. Let me just do the best with what I have. It was in those experiences that, because I put my all to it, opportunities just continued to come. I'm a creative. I'm a person who helps people connect. I'm a person who gives, and at the end of the day, my job title is not going to be on my tombstone.
Hi, welcome to the Make Minutes Matter podcast. I'm your host, Karen Gilhooly, and today we are going to chat with Matthew Jones, founder, creator, executive producer of Rainbow Creative. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, Karen. Really happy to be here.
Yes. So I think you're aware of the things that we talk about here on our show.
Yes.
And today it's an opportunity for you to share your story about how you moved from the early part of your career to where you're at right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's a journey that many people actually undertake, and that's why your story is important, I think, for people to hear. So let's start with the early days. Tell me a little bit about the early part of your career.
Yeah, so starting off, I was a film major. So I went to USC for a bit, and I went to Biola University and majored in film. And it was my dream to be a film director, and I thought I was going to get this 3-picture deal at a movie studio and do all of that. Well, I remember I was really disappointed. I was at a conference, the Biola Media Conference, and a feature film director said it takes 10 years to make your first feature. I was like, well, there are my dreams. But I was like, no, I can do it. Well, I graduated during the recession of 2008. And that completely shifted everything, the path that I was going. I always still had a creative spirit, but I found myself in a place where I just had to get a job. My dad was like, you need to get a job.
I've heard that story.
Yep.
Yes. Just go get a job.
Just go get a job,
Yes.
right. So my first job out of college, the only jobs available, I was working at Disneyland.
Wow.
Actually.
Were you a character?
I was in attractions, ride operator, so in Fantasyland,
Nice.
the Matterhorn.
I might have seen you.
You probably did. I probably helped you and said, enjoy your ride to Neverland.
You didn't get me to the front of the line.
I tried. But this story actually weaves into kind of where I got in my career. So I got a job at Disneyland, which I was working in college, the only jobs available. And it was fun, college. And then my first job, I was actually in retail for a while.
Okay.
Which was such a shift for me. So I was in retail. I was working at Apple retail, actually, as an expert.
If you're going to be in retail, that's one of the best places to be, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely was. And what was great about that experience with both Disney and Apple, I was fortunate to set me up for success, learning about the corporate world, learning about hospitality. All these things really led to, I think, the reason why my career has been so strong now. Just learning the, Disney service model, learning with Apple was all about enriching lives. We never said no, it was let's find out. I'm a very curious person. So my best friend Julie always says, I want to hire you for really anything because you're the number one hype man. Yeah. I'm still the number one Disney fan. I'm still the number one Apple fan. But in those experiences, it was an experience where, I'm here right now. Let me just do the best with what I have. But it was in those experiences that, because I put my all to it, opportunities just continued to come.
That's right.
So when I was at Apple, for example, I put my all to it. I was one of the very first experts there. I really learned how to sell very well. With Disney, I really learned the service model and customer service. And I think that's really led to why my sales skills are really strong with my business. I go over and above for my clients. So it was those experiences of really just focusing on those and learning and everything that I could soak up. And of course I wanted to get in the corporate world, and then where my journey led was how the Apple and Disney kind of came together. My best friend, Julie Partner, who I mentioned, her husband, Kyle, they were talking about with their dad at breakfast one day, and they were and her dad was a VP at Partners Federal Credit Union, Disney's credit union.
Okay.
And he said, we're looking for a tech guy, somebody who understands tech and things. Well, I worked at Apple in tech, and I worked at Disney. So the perfect fit for a a tech guy at the credit union, because I was a cast member and I understood technology. Long story short, it was a brainchild of the CEO, John Janclays, and I was the electronic delivery channel specialist, which was my role.
Wow.
Under the marketing department. And I took that job very seriously. There was a custom role from the brain of the CEO of Disney's credit union, like I got to actually create something new. So I did that, and I actually ended up working in marketing for 3 years at Disney's credit union, and it transitioned from this tech guy into a digital marketing specialist. And I was able to put a lot of my creative skills into practice with doing workshops, teaching, because the focus was teaching the members about the online and mobile technology. So I built workshops, I was in helping develop the new app and online system. But then when I was there, they were transitioning from just selling credit cards to the Disney cast members, just saying, sign up for a credit card, but instead sign for a credit card and get a Brave toy. They made it a synergy thing. So it ended up being a really cool experience working with the Disneys, with Pixar. I saw Frozen before it was even released. I saw the sketches on the screen because we had to learn it to then build the products. And it was just this incredible experience at Disney. And it was that marketing is where my career started to go. Sorry.
A couple things I think are really fascinating about what you spoke about. The first is that you worked for originally two great big brands. Yeah. So this whole idea of the brand promise, you were in positions where it gave you an opportunity to actually step into that. It wasn't just words. You were living that dream.
Yeah.
You understood what it meant.
Yeah.
That's the first. Second, which I think is something that I've learned over the years, is a real shortcoming for many organizations. I suspect you probably had a really strong onboarding proposition.
Oh yeah, the training at Disney and Apple was exceptional.
Yes, which is one of the things a lot of people will complain about. At the beginning of their job because they just want to jump right into it.
Yeah.
Really, you need to have that strong foundation in order to be able to do your best. If you don't know how something works or how something operates, how are you going to be able to jump in and actually be able to contribute in a way that's meaningful? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the way it is today has to be the way it'll be tomorrow. That is really, really important. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second is that you said something really striking to me, which is a hallmark of really great alignment. And that is when you are the candidate that someone makes the job for. That when you're not walking into a job description, you're walking into an environment where someone saw something, recognized something in you, saw the alignment of all your great talents, your experience, everything that you bring to the table, and said, aha, this is where this guy belongs.
Yeah.
So how cool is that?
The coolest.
That is the coolest.
Yeah.
That's the coolest.
I still think about it today. I mean, that was back in 2012.
It sends shivers up your spine.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was 12 years ago. And the fact that, somebody took a chance on me.
Yes.
But when I got the job, I realized I had a responsibility.
Exactly.
I had to show up every day. I would just spend time brainstorming and constantly coming up with new ideas and let's try this. I remember we had the Partners Annual Scholarship and they had me be a part of it and we got to do a synergy campaign with Monsters University and the Partners Annual Scholarship.
How cool.
How perfect.
Yes.
To create this campaign for students to give them an iPad with Monsters University branding and it wasn't in film. So what was interesting about it, it was I felt I had to grieve at the time, the film world, because I really wanted to be a filmmaker.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where I was given this opportunity to really grow. And then even though it wasn't in what I thought I was supposed to be doing, I was able to have a solid life and work for a great company and really just be able to learn a new skill. And I'm just a curious person. And the way I justified it, I was I'm in production all the time because I'm marketing. So I make something quickly instead of making a long film or a long TV show.
Yes.
But it was an opportunity where I was this is the opportunity that I'm given. It's not I stopped filmmaking, but this is where I was at the time. And let's just make the most of it because you never know where it's going to go.
That's right. It's very interesting because, many of us, myself included, when I was growing up, I thought I was going to be a teacher. And when I didn't end up teaching, I beat myself up a lot about it. And you mentioned the grieving process. It took a long time for me to get over it. And the way it happened for me, maybe for you too, is one day I was talking to both my kids about this fact that I wasn't a teacher, and I really wanted them to be able to pursue their dreams. And we were going through this very elaborate conversation, one of probably 1,000, about following your dreams. And my son looked at me and he goes, Mom, honestly, are you talking about this teaching thing again? And I said, yes, I didn't follow my dream. I should have. And he goes, Mom, you teach everybody. You can't help yourself.
Right.
It just comes out of you.
Yeah.
So that was an aha moment for me, and it sounds like for you too.
Yeah.
When you realize that the labels that we give to ourselves, especially when we're small, can really limit the way that we utilize our talents, our gifts, and our minutes.
Yeah.
And so tell me, once you realized you came to that awakening, what happened next?
It came back to my core identity. Who am I?
Yeah.
Because I am such an achiever.
Yeah.
Enneagram 3. You know, in my mind, like what would help me just like go to bed, I'm like, okay, I work for Disney. I'm a digital marketing specialist. That's not my identity. You know, like I'm actually a number with a large organization with 175,000 people.
Yes.
You know, and we've seen what's happened with like layoffs and things, you know. Like I had to really go to my core, and this is not something I actually learned until later.
Yeah.
But who am I? Who is Matthew? My nickname is MoJo. You know, and for me, you know, I'm a creative. I'm a person who helps people connect. I'm a person who gives.
Yes.
You know, and at the end of the day, my job title is not going to be on my tombstone.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true.
At the end of the day, the legacy that I'm going to live is going to be more than that. So like my dad, he actually passed away a year ago. And he was all about like working hard and achieving your dreams. One of the last conversations he had with me was talking about work and everything. And he was like, don't work too much. I was like, whoa, this is different.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, you know, he...
3-6, that's a, what do they call it? A complete lefty
complete
turn.
left field, yeah.
Yes.
And I was like, Dad, I need a vacation. He said, book it. Oh, great. So I'm on my way to France. And what I realized in like his funeral was that when they was reading the obituary and like his stories and everything, all you heard like a line of how he worked for like the first black man in Kansas City, Power and Light, and that he worked for Southern California. But what you heard was the impact he had on people, the trips he made with my mom, his kids and his grandkids. Like the legacy that you leave is not the job that you have.
That's right.
Yes, it's important to make a living. However, your identity should be wrapped in something much more. And I feel like my identity is wrapped in something much greater, which is why like I attribute the blessings to it, but of course I do the hard work. But it wasn't until like later I found that out, but I was always struggling and like working with it. It's like, you know, at my core, I'm a creative.
Yeah.
And I got to create. Walt Disney Company. I remember I was like editing on like this big Apple fancy computer, like Muppets footage in something. What? Like I used to watch the Muppets, and now I'm making a campaign video, and I will walk in the partners' branches and see these videos that I made and filmed, and like that's super cool.
It is cool.
It's not necessarily, you know, where I want it to be ultimately. I had a vision, and now I'm actually where I am to be ultimately, which is rare. But like I think the stat is like 10% of people work in the jobs that they want to in their dreams.
Yeah,
it takes years and years to get there.
It's actually quite a staggering statistic.
Yeah.
So in the world, well, let's use the United States first. Less than a third of the people here in the States are working at a job that they love.
Less than a third.
I want you to think about that for just a second.
Yeah.
That means 2/3 of the people in the world really aren't in it.
And I was in it for 2/3. I mean, I was enjoying it, but it wasn't the ultimate dream.
Yeah.
You know, it was just a path.
So I think it starts with a journey of self-discovery. So in the role, before you came to Rainbow Creative, you were on this journey, you were figuring things out, you had an opportunity to think about the fact that you weren't a filmmaker.
Yeah.
You moved on, you said, okay, I'm not going to be a filmmaker, but what can I do? So you achieved that milestone.
Right.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
And you started deploying your talents, and you realized that you had this obligation to give back, to bring yourself 100%.
Right.
When did it stop being 100% for you?
Well, I'll have to rewind a little bit to I worked in Disney and marketing, and then got a job at an agency where I met some like incredible friends and had a great experience. But it was at that agency I was getting burnt out with marketing, and I actually got an opportunity to completely shift careers, where I worked in co-working spaces and management for 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
So I worked for WeWork, I worked for Mindspace, I worked for car workplaces. So I was a
That was a hot thing to do.
Yeah,
Very
it was a hot thing to do.
Very hot, yes.
And that's when I started to lose myself a bit. Not in that these were bad companies. I did a really good job with them as a senior manager, general manager. And it was at those companies where I learned a superpower I have in sales, a superpower I have with community, and all those things led to where I am today.
Got it.
So I actually ended up working for these massive companies, and I still love WeWork, and I still love Mindspace. But personally, I got to a place where I then felt lost. I lost my identity. I lost the creativity within myself. Because, working for WeWork, everybody knows the story. It's a really high growth startup.
Yes.
That was really amazing. We were like 26 years old with like Amex corporate cards and like throwing parties and selling and meeting all these amazing people. And it was like really exciting. But the core of who I was, the things that I took from it was community. The things I took from it was network connections, networking, partnerships, but I lost my creative spark.
Yeah.
So actually it came to a point in the co-working world where I just had to make a change.
Yeah.
So that was with like Mindspace is really when that change made. I was there for a year and I loved it, but at that point I felt like I accomplished what I could accomplish in this space. And then when you're surrounded by all these amazing entrepreneurs, well, then the dream just starts to build in you.
Sure.
So that's where the dream of Rainbow Creative came. And then it was just like, it was literally forming, So it was, my Disney experience there, the Apple tech experience, the making all these connections. And that's where just the idea of Rainbow Creative came from, through being in that community. And the whole WeWork concept of community, Rainbow Creative initially, and it still is a community of creators, where I go out and I help get the brands and then connect them to all these creatives, and get them jobs to make these brands' dreams come true. Like we're making your dream come true with your podcast.
Yeah.
So it started as a video production company and then transitioned into podcasts. But it was through all those experiences. So if I didn't take my job at Apple, Disney, WeWork, Mindspace, my first clients were my WeWork and Mindspace members. I remember Mindspace, right after I left there, they were a video client of mine. I produced a commercial for them.
Isn't that something?
Marketing video. An executive at WeWork was my very first paying podcast client. I met my executive coach at a WeWork summer camp, has now turned into a 4-year client with Novus Global for a podcast.
There you go.
And that podcast then led to this, then led to that. And because I've always been a kind person, because I've always followed up, it's just really snowballed into that. So that's why it's like, yes, it took a while for my dream to form, but even the people I'm working with now, the people on my team, my vendors, the services that we use all came from these connections because I had to do what I had to do.
Sure.
And then eventually something had to break, but it was at the time when I was at Mindspace and I was just starting to get more clients. I was doing it on the side and then got to a point where it needed to be full time. And then I took a risk. I literally moved from San Francisco to LA and Ubered, Instacarted, was working on my business, did what I had to do. Got a full-time job for a bit until it couldn't anymore. But when my last full-time job ended with the pandemic, that's when I was like, I'm not turning back. I'm just going to focus on Rainbow.
Yeah.
And here we are today.
So that's interesting. So a couple things that you brought up, this whole idea of moving away from the Disney Apple environment into more of the big growth startup propositions with WeWorks and the like. And there is a lot of glamour and glitz that goes along with that. And I think a lot of people actually, when they're taking a job or thinking about a job, the window dressing is often what appeals to them.
Oh, that's why I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
Why would you leave that?
Yeah.
Why would you leave Disney? Why would you leave Apple?
Yeah.
So that's why it's hard for me to find my own thing.
Yeah.
But then it came to a point where I was like, why can't I have my Apple? Why can't I create a WeWork?
Yeah.
Why can't I create a Disney?
When you were coming to that realization that it was time to do something different, having gone through this myself, it's so much easier to talk about it in the rearview mirror, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
When you're really going through it,
right.
it's quite a cathartic experience.
Right.
And I'd like for our audience, I'd like to talk a little bit about that particular part of the journey. You had a period where life was good, and you're in another period where life is good, but that interim transition period. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think there's, again, according to the statistics, 2/3 of the population are in some form of that kind of hiatus from being engaged. So how did you find the courage? Let's talk a little bit about what that actually felt like, and what kept you moving forward.
So how I found the courage to move forward and take the leap, I will honestly attribute a lot of it with the help and guidance of my executive coach. I've had some really great executive coaches, David Gerber, Janet Breitenbach, Johan Martinez Kalilian, and really every time I had a jump, I was working with a coach.
Okay.
Actually, so like David, I'd say helped me reimagine. He helped me re-engineer my DNA.
Okay.
Janet helped me launch Really Rainbow, and Johan is really guiding me upon the path. Of course, it's the work, but it was surrounding myself with coaches and mentors to keep me accountable. So when I was taking the leap, I remember in each transition, before I made the jump until I made the final jump, I sought advisement. I created a plan for myself because someone who needs to have some structure and organization, in order to sleep at night, I have to have some peace of mind. It's like there are times when I first made the jump a little bit, I had at least a part-time job for something, but then I was betting on myself for the rest.
Yeah.
And there'd be some months where you're making a lot, some months you're making a little, and figuring that out and finding that balance, which is such a learning experience. There were times where I could go on vacation, times where I couldn't go on vacations, times where I had to invest in the business. I'm still in a place where I have to invest in a lot in the business with our growth we've experienced. So for me, it was first surrounding myself and seeing where I could invest in myself to get some guidance. But then it just takes starting it off. It just got to a point where I just had to set myself a goal and try it.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting. You mentioned this fact that the things that gave you the courage were to find someone that you could talk to. Whether that's a mentor, a coach,
It could be a parent, a best friend.
It could be someone.
Yeah.
But someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the challenges that we have in today's world, where everyone's moving so quickly and so fast that we sometimes find ourselves in a bit of an echo chamber where you're talking to ourselves all the time.
Oh, you're in your head when you're an entrepreneur all the time.
Yes. Entrepreneurs are one thing. I mean, we've got people that are also in this place in various other types of jobs, in structured jobs, in small businesses, large businesses, all over the place. I guess the point here is that when you're in the echo chamber and you don't have that ability to reflect on what actually is going on around you, that's where the danger comes in.
Yeah.
And it's easy to come up with all the reasons why you can't do something. That, I can't do it because of this. I can't do it because of that.
Out of everything.
Yes, and that I think is quite limiting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so glad to hear you say that you didn't take the leap by just jumping off without any type of security blanket.
I always had something.
A
little bit.
That is really not a great recipe for most people. So you did have some foundational stuff, but you actually had someone there to talk to that you trusted. I mean, it's another statistic that I'd just like to bring up and see how this resonates with you. One of the most telling signs of engagement in a workplace is whether the employees feel that they have someone they can confide in.
Wow.
That ability to have that conversation, I think, is so critically important. But yet, if you're in a space where you don't feel that you can have that trust, where you can't have that candid conversation, and either way, bidirectionally, then that's where you end up in these spots where you are just kind of grinding away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so hard. Mentorship and guidance is so important. That's why it's so important to have a good leader. And I mean, I think the stats are most people leave jobs not because they don't like them, it's because they don't have good leaders.
That's right.
I've been fortunate to have a lot of great leaders. Some leaders that weren't so good, which is an opportunity to learn. But that's when I sought, if I had a leader that wasn't great, I sought outside help.
Yeah.
What can I do?
Yeah.
Because ultimately you're in control. You're deciding to get up and clock in. You cannot go. You might not eat, but you cannot go.
That's right. That's right.
So we have that decision. And then now we live in a world where there are so many decisions. I've had friends who are just like, I'm over this job, maybe save some money, maybe not. Literally, you can register your car and get on the road and start making money. There's a time where I did that. I picked up people's groceries and took it to their houses.
Yeah.
Because I believed in my dream so much to do so. When I moved to LA, I thought like the gig economy was going to be as great as it was in San Francisco. It wasn't. I was a store manager at a store, ended up being a team lead, making $18 an hour when I moved back to LA.
Yeah.
And then Ubering and then Instacarting because I believed in my dream. It was one of those things where I was like, did I make a mistake? I did what I got to do. And then luckily I just went back to like a job and getting something. But there's sometimes if you believe in your dream enough, you will find a way. You don't have to pay for a coach. You can literally go to watch so many podcasts or learn on your own.
Yeah.
You can, instead of spending that money, on like drinks or just like clothes or stuff you don't need, why don't you invest in the course? Why don't you learn a skill?
Yeah.
Get on Fiverr. Like, there's literally no excuse, I think, at this point. This might be harsh not to follow your dream because of how many resources it takes to do it. But I do understand that it's scary.
Yeah.
Because it takes a special type of person or a different type of person to say, I'm actually going to give up a stable career to bet on my dream and do it full force. But you don't have to do it. You can do it on the side.
Yeah.
You can find a way. And like for me, it just got to a point where things snowballed to the point where I didn't have a choice. So that's what happened back in October 2023, where it snowballed to the point where I actually couldn't do both.
Yeah, you had to make a choice.
Right, but then at that point, now I'm always selling. Now I'm always learning. And there's much more investment to go into, but that was the next level.
Yeah, yeah. It's when we talk about following the dream, I think what's really important is that there are a lot of different ways that the dream can manifest itself. For some people, it might be entrepreneurialism. For some people, it might be working for a particular company.
Right.
For some people, it might be being a manager, leading a team. It might be being a C-level executive. There's a lot of different dreams out there.
Yeah.
And I think that having the courage to pursue that dream is really important. But equally is the whole idea of defining that dream.
Right.
So,
getting clear on your vision is very important.
Yes. And so going back to where we started, how you kind of fell into the early part of your career, it's really interesting as we go forward to take the time to actually reflect on what does make us tick.
Yeah.
So what were the things that struck you along the way that helped you understand? You've described yourself as a creative several times. So and I would agree with that. So what stood out to you? What memorable things popped out along the way that allowed you to say, I'm a creative, and not only am I creative, I'm pretty darn proud of it too.
Well, one, the reactions from people. So seeing how people moved it, because it's like, yes, I've gotten awards and things like that, but it's been more of seeing the impact that it's had on people. Like my film Human I made on Black Lives Matter, seeing the impact on, I partnered with a poet, to make that project, and seeing how people like started having conversations around it. Like my podcast, I still don't even have the capacity to understand, like to really even comprehend how many people that they view. With the podcast that I've outreach to, millions of people are listening to it a week at this point, but knowing that people are making an impact. I've had people share, I've was listening to that podcast around fitness, and then I got back into the gym, or, I read that book about, taking a quantum leap, and now, I started my business. Like those are the things that kind of keep me going as far as the creative pursuits that I do, and it helps when you get validity from the world.
Sure.
But even if you don't ever get that, validity, the fact that you made it and put it out there is more than what most people do.
Yeah.
And even if you have 10 viewers, that's 10 people who chose.
That's right.
To engage with your content.
That's right. Even one person.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we are here talking about our minutes, of course, and I've been thinking as we've been talking about. So what is that? What does it feel like when you know that your minutes are actually being put in the right spot?
Yeah.
And so the way you just described it, let me trot this one out and see if you agree. So the way it feels when you're investing your minutes the right way, if you're looking for validation of it, it feels as if the things that you are doing would be like putting an electrical cord into the socket, and all of a sudden the energy starts to flow, or flipping the switch on the light switch. When the electricity starts to flow, that's what it feels like when you're investing your minutes the right way, right?
Yeah, very much so.
And conversely, when you're not putting them in the right place, it's dead.
Right.
It's dead. There's no light.
You're flicking a light on.
Yes. There's nothing going on.
Right.
So for our audience, I think that might be a good clue. Do you think?
Absolutely.
Yes.
What makes you feel alive?
What makes you feel alive?
Excited?
Yes.
What can you do all day long? Because when you're an entrepreneur, you sometimes have to put in 12 to 16-hour days. There were times where I didn't take a full weekend off in 4 months.
Wow.
Not because because we had a high growth, but it was things that I had to do. I couldn't afford a bunch of editors at the time. I couldn't afford, a bunch of producers at the time, or now we're getting more and there's just more to do. Like you have to be able to live and breathe your dream in order to really take the leap, because if you think it's going to be easy, it's actually the opposite.
Yeah. But let me just come back to that comment for just a second. So you've described in this most recent comment, as well as several others, this whole idea of the amount of work that you've had to put in, whether it's in the job itself or the other things that allowed you to do the job. When you were doing that, did it feel like work?
No.
Yeah.
Still doesn't feel like work.
So that's another clue, I think, is that when you're in that space, when you are aligned,
right,
it just comes out of you.
Yeah.
And you're probably working harder than you ever have in your whole life.
Yeah.
But you feel that it's got purpose to it.
I feel like I'm living now.
Yeah.
Like now everything is in flow. Now, the hard conversations are not something I shy away from. The hours that I have to put in, it's just I have to put in. Friends are like, hey, do you want to hang out tonight? I'm like, actually I have 3 episodes to review. Yeah. And they're on deadline. And I have to do this. It's a choice that I have to make.
Yeah.
It's
but you don't feel bad about it.
Sometimes it's hard. I will say, honestly, it's hard because I want to go to that concert.
Of course.
I want to do those things. And it's about like managing your time and things. And I think what I'm also learning is more discipline. Yeah. Because right now I'm always on. But I've been talking to like a trainer I'm working with, and they're like, what time do you have for MoJo? And then I set those boundaries. Yeah. It's like 6 to 7:30 at the gym. Don't contact me after 8 p.m. That doesn't happen all the time yet. Yep. But at least I'm starting those boundaries, because at the end of the day, it still is a job. And like I said, the legacy I leave behind, even with my dream, people may talk about it more, but the legacy I want to leave behind is like how I treated people, my friends and family.
And what the impact of your work is.
And the impact of my work.
Yes.
Like the impact of my work is the reason, and that's why it doesn't feel like work. Yeah. Working with you on this show, like, is just a dream come true. This is my second interview, first on-camera interview for a show that I've produced. So for me, this is crazy full circle. And I'm just honored to be here. But still, you do have to have some sort of boundaries, because you can lose yourself in it. Yeah. And you become a workaholic where you won't build a family because you're just focusing on.
That's true. Else. That's true. Yeah. And so at the beginning, where you really don't know, I mean, if you look at what I'll call the stages of competence. Yeah. So here, this is how it goes. So the first stage is where you're unconsciously incompetent. Right. So unconsciously incompetent people, and I've been in this stage many times in my life. Yeah. You're running around, everything looks great and beautiful. It's all like we're talking now. That's just beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. And then that lasts for a period of time, and it has to be there, because if it wasn't there, nobody would go do anything, right? So that's where the benefit of taking a risk comes. You jump in and you believe in it, and life is great. But then after a while, you move to that next stage, which is where you realize all the things that you don't know. Oh, right. My gosh. So, and they call that unconscious. Well, unconscious incompetence is down here, where you don't know what you don't know. Right. Then you're going to conscious incompetence. Now you realize, oh my gosh, what in the heck was I getting myself into? Yep. And that's such an uncomfortable feeling, isn't it? It really is. So uncomfortable. Yeah. And I've worked with so many people over the years going up and down this ladder of competency, and to recognize what's going on. So the first one, everybody's happy and in love, and the skies are blue. Then you hit this stage where conscious incompetence, that is such a painful. It's so painful. It's so painful. And you know what? A lot of people just give up. Yeah. They give up. They start to berate themselves. Right. They do all kinds of terrible things to themselves and the people around them because they don't realize that this is a journey. And no matter who you are, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're the president of the United States or the janitor in the building. When you take on something new, and this could be anything in your life, you are going to go through this competency ladder. And the best way you can do is to recognize how you feel when you're going through it. Right. So you get through that place where now all of a sudden you know what you don't know, and then you go to conscious competence, where you see a lot of people running around with notebooks. Yep. Right. I know the answer to that. Writing it down. Yep. And those people are typically a little bit more inquisitive. They're curious. Yeah. And then you get to that place where you are unconsciously competent, which is where everybody wants to be.
Yeah,
I want to spend a couple minutes talking about there, because you've been unconsciously competent in your career many times, as have I. And the risk with that is that you become so good at it that you forget that the world is changing around you, and that you always have to be sharpening your game, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that's a question that I'd ask you is, where are you at on that competency ladder right now? And how would you describe how you felt as you were going up?
Certainly, yeah. I'm definitely at the third tier, not at the top tier quite yet.
Okay.
So there was times where I didn't know what I was doing, I was floundering, and then learning, and now things are like in control, but it's not on autopilot yet because I'm still learning a lot. But yes, I am there with that notebook.
Yes.
I am learning all these things. It's like now we're having meetings with like lawyers and publicists and operations and like all these things. And it was funny. I was talking to a mentor of mine, and I was like, we were on a meeting with the attorney, and I was giddy. I was so excited. Just like with everything that I was learning, everything that we're doing. It's like, I can't believe this is my life. Like that's what we're doing.
Yes.
So right now I'm in that place where we are, organizing, we have a team of about like 13, 15 people now. We have 13 shows that we're having production and growing. And it's one of those things where I was like, okay, this is actually a real company.
Yeah.
It's actually a real job. Looking at the things that, I've learned a lot actually in this time of things that I did wrong, but because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yes.
And so I've been getting over the shame of that. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate to have like a really strong new head of production who's like, it's okay. This is why this is this way. And this is how we can fix it. And this is how we can fix it now. So you're like learning those things, asking for forgiveness when you make mistakes, but really just like removing that shame for things. Because I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
I did the best with the information that I had. But right now that I have the tools and now that I have a really strong team around me, everyone's working like with me. I don't say for me. The people who work with me, I feel like they're my partners in my vision. And I'm just so honored that they chose, because they chose any job to just take a chance on Rainbow Creative and my vision. I feel like I have a responsibility to, give to them and just show up and be my best. And it's really cool being in a space where you have people excited and around the vision. But also I have a responsibility, I don't think for myself anymore. Every decision that I make is for me and 13 people.
And that's the case in business too.
Yeah.
I mean, very few people work by themselves.
Yeah.
Even these solopreneurs and people who might be individuals in a business, they still have to network with an environment around them.
Right.
So nobody here is an island. And I think that your comments about mistakes, I'd like to go back there for just a second, because I think this is something really important for everyone that's listening to hear and embrace. I mean, our world is built on mistakes. This room that we're sitting in right now, this technology that's bringing this podcast to the public, everything here is the end result of a series of absolutely colossal mistakes that people didn't give up. They didn't hide it. They didn't shy away from it. They learned from it. And more importantly, they leaned in and brought that knowledge to everybody around them, so that instead of having everybody have to tread down this path and make the mistakes, people could learn from it.
Yeah.
So I'm such a believer in this concept of learning through mistake and sharing it and not putting it under the covers and feeling bad about it.
Yeah.
But it is hard.
So hard.
It is hard to say I've made a mistake.
Right.
It is
the
hard.
admission. But what I've learned now is radical authenticity goes a much longer way than trying to fake it till you make it.
This is true.
For a while I was in a place where I was like, okay, I have to keep everything perfect. And then it got to a point where like I just had to be authentic with it. And the moment I was authentic, people are like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I actually went through that too.
Yeah.
I actually went through that too. So, facing things with radical authenticity allows me to go with a clearer mindset, and then allows me to get curious.
That's right.
What can I do now?
Right.
It's like we are in a place where we need more funding. So it's like, how do we do that? Do we look into angel investments? Do we look into sponsorships?
Yeah.
What can I sell? What can I do? I'll build a deck. Like, I'll network with these people. Who can I talk to? These are the things that like you need to do.
That's right.
And it's a really exciting place to be. And then like, I remember one of the things my mom says is that, if you don't ask, like, you won't get anything. It's like, if they say no, it's great. You're back in the place where you were before.
That's right. That's exactly
But
right. 100%.
they might say yes.
That's right. There is one sure way.
Yeah.
I forget who actually said this, but there's maybe it was Michael Jordan that he said it. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Yeah.
And that is true. So by getting yourself out there, by experimenting, by being able to make a mistake, to share that back with other people, I think that is the way of the world, and we've gotten away from it.
Right.
And maybe we have to lean into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So whether you're on the side of making the mistake,
Right.
or being on the side of learning about the mistake, to be, I guess, a little bit less emotional about it.
Right.
I mean, how much
that's a good
energy
point,
do
yeah.
you spend
Right.
worrying about, if somebody finds out about this?
Yeah.
That's
Turn into action now.
yes, you have to be able to do something with
Right.
it. You have
Yeah.
to be able to do something with it.
Yeah.
I do think that. Wow. So tell us, Matthew,
Yeah.
if you were going to give some advice to our viewership.
Yeah.
Now remember, we've got people of all walks of life listening to us now.
Right. Yeah.
So what would you tell them about this idea of stepping into yourself, about making your minutes matter?
Yeah.
What 3 pieces of advice would you give them?
Okay. First, I would say it's not too late. It's never too late. I think I saw a stat of like Oprah started when she was like 40,
Okay.
and now she's Oprah.
Yeah.
My mom is in the next stage of her career, after retirement, and now like a book agent and like keynote speaking, later in life. It's never too late, I would say first.
Okay.
But as far as like the 3 steps, I would say, and I actually just wrote this in a post the other day. 1, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Whatever you want to do, just prepare like you're in that job today.
Okay.
So like there were times where when I made the leap to really go full time in October, we had a period of low, like just not having enough clients for a while, just to be where I wanted to be. But I still showed up and went to the gym. I still woke up and like got on my desk and went to my office. I still, tried to get more leads. Out of that experience is where we launched our just post-production service line, which actually has turned into a business that's getting more profitable and getting more clients out of it. So stay ready and stuff, get ready. Like I just continued to innovate. I continued to learn. I then started reading books since I had the time about leadership, started sharpening my sales skills, started like finding new ways to do. So first, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Next, I'd say is seek some mentorship. Like let's say if you are in a stable job and you don't know where to go, hire a coach. You're actually probably in an instance where you can actually make a bit of investment in your life. And that holds some sort of accountability to like get there. It could be talking about it in therapy.
Could you also, if let's say you're in a position where you can't hire a coach, then maybe seek someone out to have an honest conversation
Exactly.
with. Yes?
And it could be buying somebody lunch or coffee.
Yes.
I just want to have an honest conversation with you on my goals. And would you mind holding me accountable? Like there's someone who I'm working with right now. I have a big, finally creative idea for an original project. And she's holding me accountable to write my treatment and to help the dream.
That's
I
good.
have like so many people on MoJo's team. I can't do anything alone. I just do things with community because the thing is community is important.
Yeah.
And when I rise, we rise together.
That's right.
So I would say stay ready to get ready.
Find a mentor.
Hire a team, find a mentor. Be open to shifts and change.
Yeah.
Because
Be flexible.
Be very flexible. And that's what I've learned the most.
Because sometimes the best opportunity comes in that shift.
Oh, yeah.
The best opportunity comes in that shift.
Right.
It's kind of a crazy thing.
Yeah,
isn't
like
it?
there's some crazy things happening with the business that I cannot wait to announce when they're finished that have just come through being flexible about the changes. And it's actually the most fun, because I actually get really bored if I know what's happening like every day.
Yeah.
Well,
that's part of being a creative.
Right.
So every day, as a creative, you have to create.
Not everybody is like that.
Yeah.
But I enjoy, the opportunity to do something new and be flexible. But in order to really take the leap, you have to be flexible. Because even when things are not going the way they aren't going, that you think they're going to go, trust me, what's on the other side can be beyond your wildest dreams.
Yeah.
And I know because it's happening to me right now.
Yeah. And isn't that the truth? Isn't that, I mean, there's a plus and a minus, a yin and a yang to just about everything in the world.
Yeah.
And it's there if you want to find it.
Right.
But it does take effort. But
it does take effort.
It's worth it.
Right. It's definitely worth it. It does take effort. So I would say just try, because you can always go back to your job. And that's one thing that my mentor told me. He was like, if you fail, you can get another job.
Yeah. You can always get another job.
You can always get another job. I could walk into Trader Joe's and get a job if I needed to.
That's right.
You know, you can always get another job.
Yeah.
Even if it's something that you don't like, you can have a stability, but like, why not try?
Yeah. And if you do have to take one of those jobs, then how do you find the way to stay true to yourself? How do you stay true to being able to plug that electricity in? Make sure that it's there for yourself, for the people around you, and for the world at large.
I would give yourself deadlines and accountability. You know, first I would enjoy the time there. Like I remember at Eisenberg, I didn't know why I was at Eisenberg, and I met our senior producer on the show, Steven. He's one of my best friends.
Yeah,
and was the first employee I was able to hire, and has been with us for like the longest time. And has really grown with us. Like you never know who you're gonna meet. You might be your best friend. You might be there and meet your spouse.
You never know.
You might be there and meet your whoever.
Yeah.
But like you never know where you're gonna get and like be in those instances. But then what I will also say is don't lose spark in that vision. Give yourself deadlines, because go to the beach, have a vacation, chill out, read a book. But then there's probably going to be 2 hours in the day where you can do a power 2 hours of just working on your dream.
Yeah, that's true.
Write 1 page a day.
There you go. Well, that sounds like a great place to wrap up. So on that note, I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Make Minutes Matter podcast. And Matthew, where might we find you if someone wanted to find out a little bit more about all the great things you're up to?
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. Yes, you can go to our website, rainbowcreative.co. That's rainbowcreative.co. Follow us on Instagram, rainbowcreative_. And if you want to see all what I'm up to, what I'm listening to, doing my journeys around the world, you can also follow me on Instagram at MoJoAdam_.
Wonderful. And don't forget to follow us on YouTube, subscribe on the YouTube channel, and then listen to us wherever it is that you might be listening to your podcast. I'm Karen Gilhooly, and don't forget, make minutes matter. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Make Minutes Matter. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or click the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And let me know what you thought of today's conversation by following us on Instagram at Karen Gilhooly 1. That's Karen, Karen, Gilhooly, Gilhooly, and the number 1. Let's make every moment in your career truly matter. Have a great day.